Did you know Reed College is one of Southeast Portland's largest employers? Reed has opportunities in a wide range of career fields from entry-level to senior management in occupations such as community safety, IT, and public affairs. Reed offers exceptional benefits in a working environment that combines Portland's natural beauty with an inclusive, progressive campus. Whether you're just starting out or looking for the next chapter in your career, start your search at jobs.reed.edu. Come work with Reed's friendly and accomplished staff at one of the nation's top colleges.
This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ben Forstag, Becky Thomas, and Jessica Black from the Mac's List team. This week, we're talking about how to switch careers. We all know that we're likely to change careers several times in the 40-plus years each of us spends in the workplace. But many of us struggle with choosing our next field. Our guest expert this week is Danna Redmond, host of the Career Q podcast. She says one of the best ways to determine your next career is to start with your skills. Danna and I talk later in the show. Changing careers doesn't mean you have to change companies too. Ben has found a blog post that shows how you can move from one field into another within the same firm. He tells us more in a moment. How do you make a career switch without taking a pay cut? That's our question of the week. It comes from listener Nick Macchio of Holtsville, New York. Becky shares her advice shortly. First, as always, let's check in with the Mac's List team. Our topic this week is career switching, and everybody around this table has changed fields at least once, some of us many times. I'm curious, gang, what is your number one tip for listeners who want to change careers? Jessica, you look like you've got a thought.
Sure, I can go first. I guess are the things, I don't know, I feel like I say this all the time, of...
Repetition is good.
It can be, yeah, it can be good. Is just to start, taking on skills in that other industry that you want to move into. Whether that is, I've done it a lot with internships and, or volunteering. I speak about that a lot.
And can you give us an example of what field you were in and where you went and how an internship or maybe a class or some experience let you get new skills? Or
Sure. Well, I will say mine is complicated because I didn't really fully have an entrenched career to start with. And so it was more of me as I was figuring out my career path. But it was switching from different fields, I guess. I was in the service industry for a long time outside of after college while I was trying to figure it all out. And so I, like I said, did some internships in nonprofits in different areas that way to be able to build those skills. And then, like I said, took on volunteer opportunities to be able to do that.
Yeah, because I know right after college, I think you worked in the hospitality industry in Europe.
I did, yeah.
Right, for 2 years.
I did.
And I think you were working at a hotel.
I was,
That's very different than working...
in an office.
Yeah.
Well, and very different from, I was working, one of my first internships that I did when I was trying to switch into kind of from the hospitality service industry into more of the nonprofit office type work. I took on an internship in development work, fundraising, that sort of thing. And it was really, really fun and interesting and all of that, but it definitely helped me learn that I don't want to work in fundraising. And that's not where my skill set lies, but I was able to gain other skills within that as well. So
Okay.
I'm hoping that's helpful.
No, I think that's very helpful.
Yeah.
How about you, Becky? You were, I think right after college, you were working for a newspaper. and here you are, digital marketing manager at MaxList. But there were some other stops along the way too.
Yeah, for me, I had a lot of the same sort of challenges that most people have when they're looking to switch careers. I was burnt out on my current industry, and I didn't see a long-term
working as
path.
a reporter.
Yeah, I was a newspaper reporter, and I loved a lot of it, but I didn't love the long hours and the low pay and the sort of instability in print media. And so I was ready to sort of look for something a little bit more stable and a little bit more, like more room for growth in my career and things like that. And so I just looked at my own skills and thought about what areas, what things I like to do, and where I could make more money. To be frank, this is a big part of, my thought process is
it's
how do
important.
I survive?
It really is important.
Yeah. And I want to be honest about that. That's part of my choice. And I think a lot of people have that same question. Actually, my listener question today is that.
Okay.
But, and so I, looked at my skills and decided to sort of pursue communications and marketing, and it's worked out. Yeah. So, I think go ahead.
No, so you switched for, I think you were the editor of a weekly newspaper.
I was a reporter. I was a newspaper reporter.
But in a small rural community.
And,
which is different than being, I think that your next stop was working for a marketing firm in a medium-sized city. I think you came to Portland, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I don't know how deep to get into this story, but...
Go deep.
Okay. Well, I moved to Portland and didn't have a job like every other 20-something. And I took a job at a call center, working at just incoming call center.
I knew that voice was familiar.
You were that really mean client that I had to help, just
perfect
yelling
training
at me
for
all
podcasting.
The time. Yeah, totally.
Please hold. I'll transfer you.
Yes, exactly. And worked my way up in that company and was lucky enough to, I did an internship as well during that time, since I was working a swing shift, and I did an internship during the day.
Yep.
And then I worked my way into a marketing position. And I started at the bottom, and I think it's about staying true to your skills and pursuing those things. And it is about sacrifice and sort of working hard and doing double duty sometimes. But it's, usually, it works out. And if it doesn't, then that's a lesson too.
Ben, what about you? What's your top tip for switching careers? And what did you switch from, and what did you move to? What was the job that you were in that you wanted to get out of, and what did you end up moving into?
So, as I've said before, my background's in nonprofit management, or my most recent background, and I just got kind of burnt out on the nonprofit thing and decided I wanted to find something a little bit more entrepreneurial. And so this desire to change jobs coincided with me moving to Portland as well, and I was actually trying to find a job in the business community in Portland from 4,000 miles away in Washington, D.C., and it was not working. And mostly because I was just, applying for jobs I found on job boards, including MaxList. And then I ended up landing a job kind of by some luck and some skill in the nonprofit sector, because I gave up trying to make this transition. Worked there for a couple of years, and then I decided I really want to get out of nonprofits. I really want to make this transition. And the one thing that made all the difference between the first failed attempt and the second more successful attempt was networking. Because instead of being that candidate who's out there applying for a job and the employer doesn't see a whole lot of relevant experience in the field on my resume, and they don't know who I am from any other candidate or a hole in the wall. When I was networking in Portland, I was talking to people, and even if I didn't have a whole lot of formal experience in the business community on my resume, people got to know who I was, and they got to hear some of my other accomplishments, and they could see for themselves how some of my skills that I developed in the nonprofit world might play in the for-profit community. And so I guess that's my number one tip to anyone. It's just network, get known, have people like you and want to advocate for you and hopefully take a chance on you.
Oh. I had a similar experience. I think I've talked about this on earlier shows. I was living in Boston working for a human rights nonprofit that was focused on Latin America, and I didn't want to leave the city when the program ended. And I struggled with finding my next job, and doing informational interviews as well as volunteering, as Jessica was talking about earlier, helped on a congressional campaign gave me the insights and the experience I needed to make the switch to communications for in state and local government. And so I went from working for a human rights group that ran programs overseas to becoming the spokesperson for a big transportation project in Boston, the Big Dig. But I wouldn't have gotten there without, I wouldn't have made that switch in careers without the networking that you talked about, particularly the informational interviews.
Yeah, I mean, this gets to a point that I think most people know, which is, it doesn't matter how good you look on paper or how qualified you are. It's the people who know other people end up getting the jobs, but you can use that fact to your advantage.
Right. Yeah. Well, great tips. And I know that Danna will have others for us as well. But before we chat with her, let's turn to you, Ben, because you're out there every week poking around the internet, looking for not internships, but websites, books, and tools. I hope you're not looking for an internship that our listeners can use in a job search or in managing a career. So what have you uncovered this week, Ben?
Well, this week, I want to talk about two different things that I found.
More than one.
It's a twofer,
Okay.
Another twofer. So I kind of stumbled onto this data point that I thought was really interesting this week, and it comes from Gallup and an article that they wrote called "When Making Career Moves, Americans Switch Companies." And the basic data point here was that 93% of people who want to change roles or responsibilities leave their current employer to do so. So that means 93% of the time, if someone says, like, I want something more from my job, I want to become a manager or a director or a president, they leave their company to do so, which I thought was just kind of shocking, right? Because you're leaving everyone who you know and all of your kind of closest contacts in the company and going and starting something new. And so this got me thinking about strategies where, like, could you make a lateral move in your career without switching employers? Like, could you advance yourself in the company you're already in? And I think people don't think about this a whole lot, right? They think like any movement you get in the company is the company promoting you up. It's something they do to you as opposed to you're taking agency in it and like you're making that active choice to do a career transition. And so I did a little bit of research and I found this really interesting article called "Career Change by Staying Put: How to Make a Lateral Move Within the Same Company." And this one comes from Forbes.com. And I'll apologize ahead of time. Any article from Forbes, you have to sit there and look at an advertisement for about 10 seconds before they actually show you the article.
And there's a quotation too, I think.
Yeah, it's a cheesy quotation from some business executive.
Hey, I like those quotes. I like those quotes.
Okay, Becky, then I will not apologize to you.
I'm actually in Becky's camp on this one too. Yeah, but go ahead,
Okay,
Ben.
so
we're not ganging up on you.
So I thought this was really good, and the author just lays out a couple simple tips for if you're working in an organization and you really want to switch what you're doing, like ways that you could go from vertical A over to vertical B and like negotiate that change in the company. And some of her quick tips were, one was enroll stakeholders, and we know this one, get people to like you and know you, network, make sure that they believe that you can do the job. Two is apply officially and unofficially. This is, again, something we've talked about in the past where you might have to fill out the official paperwork, but most of the work is going to be done like going and whispering in people's ears and saying, hey, I'm applying for this. Let's talk about it. And then a third one that I thought was a really good point was just planning a smooth transition, because hiring people is this huge burden for people. And so is when anyone leaves an organization. It's this huge bureaucratic administrative burden for everyone involved. And if you can kind of position yourself saying like, you don't need to onboard me if you just transfer me to this other department. Like, I already know the company culture. I can already help you out. And I'm going to help you find my replacement. So like it's smooth on both the departing department and the arriving department. I thought that was a really good point. So again, the article is called "Career Change by Staying Put: How to Make a Lateral Move Within the Same Company." It's on the Forbes.com website, and we will have the full URL in the show notes.
It's a great example of managing up. You're not waiting for something to happen. You're figuring out how you can make it happen and what the people around you, particularly your supervisors, are going to need to act.
Yeah, and in a lot of organizations, really any medium-sized and up organization, they might have like multiple different departments or multiple different businesses essentially that are in the same house or under the same company name. And it offers a lot of opportunities to kind of shift around and try new things out. And again, it's who you know, and you're starting from a really strong place where if you're a proven good employee in the company and you know other people in the company, it puts you in a position to really get your foot in the door, even if you don't have the skill set that other candidates might have.
Well, thanks, Ben. If you have a suggestion for Ben, please write him. We'd love to share your idea on the show. Ben's address is ben@maxlist.org. Now let's turn to you, our listeners. Becky is here to answer one of your questions. Becky, what's in the mailbag this week?
This week's question is actually perfect for the subject of today's episode, so that's awesome. It comes from Nick Macchio in Holtsville, New York. And Nick writes, I listen to a lot of career podcasts and read a lot of articles. The one thing that's always missing is how do you make that career change pivot when you're established and have a family to support but can't afford a pay cut? I think that's one of the biggest challenges. It's actually the one thing that prevents me from switching careers in hopes of finding work I enjoy. Nick, I definitely feel for you here. This is a real challenge, and it's not one to sort of skip over. Money is like one of the biggest things in any career, and it's definitely a big part of a decision to make a change. Totally understand when there's a family to support and you need to make at least the same amount of money that you're making now. So it's definitely a challenge. I want to acknowledge that. And, the first step that is just really thinking about it and considering your options. So I would really advise you to do some sort of soul searching about your career and sort of what you don't like about your current career and what you want in your next career. So if you do have a dream career that you've thought about for years, or you've always sort of thought you'd be great at but have never pursued, maybe because of some inherent barriers, maybe come back to that and think about some options for, you might be able to sort of combine some aspects of your current career with some others of your dream career and make it work that way. There's just, a lot more flexibility, I feel like, in today's career market, and you can sort of do maybe 2 different jobs, simultaneously, or work some scheduling things out. Really just dig in a little bit to see what's feasible. And actually, I was thinking about we just had a recent episode, just a few episodes back. It was 101, and Kathy Caprino was our guest, and she gave us some really sort of good tactics for you to think about career change and how to really make it happen and pursue it. And she talked about salary expectations and some specific advice for, really think about like how much money do you need to survive? Is this career change really going to make a huge difference in your career? And if so, what can you cut back on right now to make it happen? I know that's sort of vague, and it's a really tough thing, and there's not really an easy answer for it, but I think that it's definitely worth doing some thinking and some sort of working out the numbers and see if you can make it happen, because it's worth making some sacrifices to find a career that you really enjoy, and hopefully you can work it out. It's a tough one. Do you guys have any other thoughts?
Ben looks like he's ready.
Yeah, Ben's ready.
And I have some thoughts after Ben.
Okay,
so.
good.
Yeah, get in line, Jessica.
I'm letting you go full steam. I'm just saying.
I think she's letting you go first, Ben.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, totally understand the whole need for money thing. Everyone works for a paycheck, or almost everyone works for a paycheck. I'm sure at this point, Warren Buffett does it just because for fun and giggles. But
money is an important factor in the world. Yeah.
So a few things I would say. One is, I think the feasibility of having a second full-time job where you're making money and doing what you love is probably not great, but you could always probably pick up a side consulting gig where you're doing a couple hours a week of work. I mean, most people have that kind of space where you're working in the evening when your kids are asleep, or setting aside a couple hours on the weekend. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would say, and this goes back to what the point I was making before, is just network. If you really know where you want to be and what field you want to be in and what you want to be doing, find the people who are doing that and who are hiring people like that. And before you even ask them for a job, just go out and make yourself known to them. Go to the events where they're networking, ask for informational interviews, do that kind of stuff of just where people know who you are. because again, there's a few basic dynamics at play, I think, here. One is that, again, people hire folks that they know. Hiring's a risk, and they'd rather hire someone they know in person, even if it's not the best candidate on paper. And third, it's like you can teach just about anything to anyone in 6 months. And I think most employers know that there's going to be a big learning curve when you bring on a new candidate. And so if you can show that like you're really accomplished in your current field and you're like, you know how to learn, you're a good worker, you're enthusiastic. If you can show all those kind of baseline skills, I think a lot of employers know like, well, I can teach this person what they need to do in the job here at my organization. And a lot of organizations, like they have their own way of doing it anyway. So even if you're perfect on paper, they're going to try to reteach you how to do it once you come on board. So just networking, getting yourself known is a great way to keep the current job you got while positioning yourself maybe to get an opportunity down the road in the field where you want to be.
Yeah, that's I have other things to add, but networking was definitely up there on my list of ways that you can get around the having to get a second job if you are not able to do that to build those additional skills if that's what you need. But networking, I think, is a really crucial component of that, especially the informational interviews to understand what it is that you need in that switching of careers. And again, to just make those contacts and start building those connections so that you know about these jobs that may or may not be listed on a job board. Additionally, I was thinking I'm a big fan of using the skills that you have in your current career to talk about how you can finding the threads, I like to say. And I think that's I stole that from Aubrey de Klerk. That's her wording, but I love it because there are always those common threads that you, even if you're changing careers or industries, that you bring the same kind of general skills to that. So finding exactly how you can make that, talk about that, share your narrative, share your story about how the skills that you have from your previous career is positioning you well for this new career that you have, so that when you are having those informational interviews, you are networking, you can talk about, I wasn't able to take an internship, but I have X, Y, and Z from my previous career that would position me really well for this new career that I want to move into. Those types of things, so that that was another thing that I wanted to say was about the if you can identify those threads and how you are a great candidate for switching careers in that way, you may not even have to take a pay cut because you're positioning yourself well to move kind of laterally, even though it's not the same company. So I think that those are some tips for.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think that there is this sort of assumption that in order to make a change, you have to take an extreme pay cut, but that may not necessarily be the case. And
I don't think that's always the case.
Yeah, we're sort of digging into it and really figuring out what is really realistic.
Yeah. I to your point, Jessica, about doing the homework, not only figuring out what it's going to take, but what it will pay, or the job that you want, what it pays. I think doing your homework and doing the math are the two key things here, and forgive me, Nick, if you've done the homework and you've discovered that the position you want does indeed pay less, and that's tough. But if you haven't, that makes for a difficult choice. But if you haven't had an opportunity to do that research yet, don't assume that you have to take a significant pay cut. You find out what the numbers say.
Or it may be a factor of taking the pay cut at first and then moving into a significantly higher paying role later. Yeah. And so that may just be, pay up front kind of a thing, and for the bigger gains later.
Right. Know what the career ladder is for that position and what those jobs pay. Well, excellent advice. And Nick, thank you so much for your question. If you have a question for Becky, please send her an email. Her email address is becky@maxlist.org. You can also call her listener line. That's area code 716-JOB-TALK. Or send us a tweet. Our Twitter handle at MaxList is @max_list, LIST. If we use your question on the show, we'll send you a copy of our new book, Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. We'll be back in just a moment, and when we return, I'll talk with our guest, Danna Redmond, about how to switch careers.
Reed College is one of Southeast Portland's largest employers. Reed offers competitive salaries and exceptional benefits on a campus that combines architectural and natural beauty with an inclusive, progressive work environment. If you're looking for jobs in Portland, consider joining Reed's friendly and accomplished staff, like Taylor Smith, Associate Director of Computer User Services.
I think the best part of working at Reed has to be the people. The size of Reed is much smaller than what I've worked at before, and I think that makes this such a great community. This is a really special place.
Like Alexander Charon, Assistant Director of Annual Fund.
It's great working with students. They think about really immense things, and they have you thinking about immense things. And that really is great, because in advertising, I didn't think about anything immensely except maybe, stress and stuff.
Whether you're just starting out or looking for the next chapter of your career, begin your search at jobs.reed.edu. That's jobs.reed.edu.
Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Danna Redmond. Danna Redmond hosts the podcast, The Career Queue. She has a passion for helping people turn career goals and dreams into reality. Danna is an accomplished business leader. She worked for almost 20 years for Fortune 50 companies, and she joins us today from Seattle, Washington. Danna, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mac. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Now, our topic this week is about how to switch careers. And I know when you and I talked about this earlier, you think one of the most important starting points begins with people being clear about their skills. Why is that a good jumping off point, Danna?
Absolutely. I think there's this piece to knowing what I call your core competencies. So what are you really good at, and what do you really enjoy doing? And then I think there's the possibility to take that in many different areas. So by people getting really clear about that, and some of that may change even as you go through your career. So I also think it's important to check back in with yourself on a regular basis to make sure that you're still enjoying what you thought you enjoyed. And is there a new skill set maybe that you've learned that you can take in a different area? But I think those are the portable things about an individual, or what I call their core competencies. And you can take that into so many different areas. So knowing what those are and then having confidence in using those is so key.
And I know in both on your show and on your website, you also talk about the value of not only recognizing those core competencies and understanding them, but getting really good at the job you have now. Why is that a good thing to do before you switch careers?
Right. Well, I think being really good at the job that you are in today does a couple of things. One, it gives you a brand, or it lets people know who you are. It gives you some confidence as well. So if you can get really good at what you do and you can get some accolades for that, or you feel like you're moving forward, I think it gives you some more of that confidence that you need to maybe pick up some of those skills and try them in a new area. But even more important than that, I really think it is about that, your personal brand, and sort of letting people know who you are and what you're about. And by doing a good job, whether that's, just being able to get stuff done or following up with what you say you're going to do, it really then helps as you start networking and looking for new opportunities for people that, they may say, hey, I don't have an exact job that fits your skill set, but I know who you are and sort of what you can deliver, what kinds of things you can deliver and how you deliver, and makes them likely more willing to help you out in a job search.
Now, often I think when people hear the advice, learn new skills, they think, okay, I need to go to a course or take an online class or attend a conference. But you say that another way to do that is to look for opportunities in your current job to take on things that maybe might make you uncomfortable, but give you a chance to master a new skill. Can you tell us more about that, Danna?
Absolutely. I think looking around in your current company or your current job and seeing if you're in a big company, there might be opportunities where you can volunteer your skills and you can become the subject matter expert for a different team that's looking to implement something. Or if you're in a smaller company, you get the opportunity, I think, to wear many hats when you're at a smaller company. So take advantage of those and stretch out and think, wow, I'm really good at possibly project management and putting plans together, and I can organize a project. So volunteer those skills in other areas that might not be your core set. Maybe you have traditionally done that in a marketing setting. Maybe you've been a marketing planner. Hey, what about seeing if that works in the IT organization, right? Do they need planners and project managers? So I think it comes back to that core competencies that we talked about, knowing what you're good at, but then being willing to sort of look around and try to find those. And I'd also say if you don't find that, your current, employed where you're getting a paycheck, look for volunteer opportunities to sort of stretch your wings into new areas. Because what you might discover then is just a new passion area or a new skill set that you didn't know you had before.
Now, when people are ready to learn new skills or take on new opportunities to master and acquire new strengths, how do they get clear about what they need to do, what their gaps are? Because we've talked about playing to your strengths and thinking about a career switch, but how do you get clear, Danna, about the areas that you might be weak in and the skills that you do need to add?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer, as you mentioned, in playing to your strengths. And I think going out there and really trying some things and, going into an area and knowing maybe you don't know everything, but being willing to learn is very key. And, most of the times when you go into a new opportunity, if you can say, hey, this is the part of this job or this role or this opportunity that I know really well, but I don't know maybe the technology as well. Is there a partner or somebody that you can partner with on that team, on that new team that you can learn from? Or is there specific pieces that you can go and study? But I think so much of it does come back to having that confidence in yourself. If you know what you're good at and you're using those pieces, so much else is learnable that you can learn on the job or in the role, and having the confidence just to go for it.
So be confident, be prepared to take risks. Mm-hmm. But again, as I think about my skills and what I have to offer and what I need to add, where does planning for that new career come in? How do you get clear about the goals and the skills you're going to need to accomplish that new goal?
Right. Well, there's definitely something. There's a career planning model out there that I sort of subscribe to and really believe in, and it's called planned happenstance, which means, you have to be planful about a certain part of it, and then a certain part of your career, you also have to, just be ready for those opportunities to come your way and be open to those opportunities. There's always that question in like a job interview that says, what's your 5-year plan? And that one always makes me cringe because if you were to have asked me 5 years ago what I would be doing today, I could not have described what I was doing today. But what I could have described to you was the skill sets I would have been using, sort of the environment I would be in. And so I think it's important to, be okay going into something and not having, all of the building block, all of the pieces totally lined up, and knowing that you're going to learn those as you go and be ready to learn those as you go. Just with different technology and the world is evolving so quickly, you have to get really good at learning quickly and adapting.
So be open to experimentation, be ready to adapt. And are there other qualities or traits you encourage people to keep in mind as they explore these new careers? And finally, how do they narrow that down to a short list of things? Because you might try a lot of different experiences, but in the end, how do you know that this direction is going to be the one that you want to pursue?
And it might come down to that it's not just one opportunity that you want to pursue, or that you are going to have to pursue all at the same time. So, one way to think about a career planning is sort of this portfolio idea where you go and get, a variety of different experiences, and each of those could lead you down a different path. So I think it comes back down to knowing, a lot about what you enjoy. So there's this piece of what you're good at, but then also knowing what are those, what I would call non-negotiables of a career for you, and whether that's the environment you're in, whether that's the location you are, whether that's the sort of the working environment, the structure. So knowing what your non-negotiables are and then balancing those up against any of the opportunities that may present themselves. And using that, I think, as your final bar to decide.
Any tips about how to create opportunities? I think some of this is implied as people learn new skills or take on unfamiliar tasks. I think your point is that opportunities will present themselves, but are there ways that people can be strategic about it and create opportunities rather than wait for them to come to them?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the piece to the word, the planned part of planned happenstance is this isn't just a sit back and, let things happen and fingers crossed some good will come your way. It does come from, individuals getting out there, networking with other people. So even if it's people that aren't in your field, or maybe they are in your field, having those conversations, doing those informational interviews, talking to the people that are sitting next to you on the bus, or talking to the people that are, sitting next to you in the stands at your kids' soccer game, and just continually, being curious about, what's out there in the world, and then being willing to, continue to follow any of those. So I think that there's this base curiosity that you have to want to continue to develop in your career and in your jobs.
What are some common mistakes you see people make when switching careers, Danna, and how do they overcome those challenges?
I think a real common one is not giving yourself enough of an opportunity, like thinking really very linearly about your career, or think, oh, this is my skill set. So that I've only ever been in a product manager in IT. So that means that's the only place I can continue to go is to seek out, jobs within an IT organization. Why not pick up those skills and, look around at other places? Is nonprofits an option? Is there the same thing in marketing? So I think that I see people sometimes limit themselves. I see that a lot when people have worked on a technology. They get very married to, I'm an expert on a particular type of technology, and think then that that's the technology they have to stay in, when quite honestly, many of the skills that they will have developed, are applicable into other technology areas. Especially I see this in, sort of product management, systems analyst type folks who have, gotten really good at a particular technology, but then they don't realize, wow, that piece about being really good means they're a systems thinker, they're a planner, they know how to get user requirements, and that's applicable in other areas. So I really just encourage people, not to put your blinders on when it comes to possibilities.
Any other tips about how to break out of that mindset? Because I see that a lot as well with people I talk to who have always done one thing and just can't imagine doing something else, or think that they have to go back to college or get a new degree. What are some, not shortcuts, but concrete steps people can take to break down that mindset?
Yeah. I really encourage people, just even in their own lives, to think back, where were they 10 years ago? And likely they weren't doing the same thing 10 years ago. And to really, look back at their own history, their own career history, and realize they've evolved and changed. Or maybe they weren't working 10 years ago and now they are. And, sort of looking back and knowing they've already evolved, and so they can continue to evolve. And then even just in your own personal life, I think it's an interesting thing to think about. 10 years ago, the technology, we didn't carry around small computers in our pockets, right? I mean, most of us were still talking landlines 10 years ago, but every single one of us has adapted to carrying smartphones and how to use them. And if you can think that, in my own personal life, I finally, I don't even need my VCR anymore. I've learned how to do streaming videos and, streaming on my TV. that you do have that ability to, sort of learn these new skills and pick those up and take those in other places. So looking more internally, and people I think will realize, wow, I really have evolved, and then now challenge them to think about that in their career as well.
Well, I love the image of the VCR. It was such a big, important part of people's lives in the 80s and 90s. And now I can't even remember the last time I saw one at a Goodwill.
It was so interesting. Like, there used to be this joke, like, oh, my VCR, the time flashes because I've never been able to learn how to change the time on my VCR. Hey, you didn't need that skill now, right? So,
yeah, but it's a good reminder that in all of our lives, we're going to go through a lot of change, both personally and professionally. Well, thanks so much. This has been a great conversation, Danna. Now, tell us what's coming up next for you.
So we are going to continue to be publishing weekly podcasts on the Career Q podcast that I co-host with Stacy Harris, my podcast co-host. So we've got those coming out weekly with lots of great guests all about career development topics. And then we're also planning a few more career development workshops here. We're based out of the Seattle area. So we've got a couple more of those on tap, and then we'll be looking around sort of the country and other places that we might take those career development workshops.
Well, I know people can learn more about your work that you and Stacy do by visiting your website, which is www.thecareerq.com, and that's spelled THE, career, CAREER, and then Q, CUE.com. And I encourage listeners to check out your show. I've listened to a number of episodes. You and Stacy do a terrific job.
Well, thank you, Mac, and same to you. I've always enjoyed listening to your show as well.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us today, and it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We're back in the studio with Becky, Jessica, and Ben. What are your thoughts about my conversation with Danna? Who wants to go first? Jessica, you're in the starting gate.
Sure, I'm
You're
fine.
leaning in to the microphone.
I can go first, no problem. That was a fantastic interview. I really enjoyed a lot of her points, but I did really like, at the end of the talking about the technological side of things, that there are ways that people can, I think a lot of people get into that mindset of, you spoke to this, but, I'm entrenched in this career and there's no way that I can learn these new skills, or they feel like it's this daunting, big task, and kind of get scared about it. And
it can seem scary, can it?
It can definitely seem scary. And I think that, that fear and kind of getting into your head about it all leads to more fear and not moving at all. And I think that her reminder of, we've all done these concrete things and we've all adapted and we've all evolved and we've all, even just looking at, I liked her point about looking at what you've done 10 years ago and how much you've evolved and changed throughout that. But then also, smartphone technology and all of these things that we adapt to and we learn, and we have demonstrated that we are capable of taking on, and I think that can be easily transferred into professional skills as well.
And reminding ourselves that we each have a story like that. We were
absolutely.
all very different when we were teenagers or in our 20s or 30s.
Absolutely.
Whatever age, wherever we may be in our career.
Yeah, and finding those threads, like I said before, but like she mentioned, of the skills that you had 10 years ago that haven't changed but have evolved and have grown and strengthened and all that stuff.
Yeah. Ben, you look like you have a point.
I had a point. Jessica,
before I talked over.
kind of took it all.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think we took the same thing away from it, which is, that we're all kind of evolving in our careers all the time, and we tend to hold ourselves back when we stop and critically think about it, right? When we get to this career juncture where we want to do something different, we're like, well, I can't do that because, I do this, but you weren't always doing this, whatever this is. Yeah. I know that's certainly true for me. Even last year, when I think about what I was doing, how I was spending my time last year versus this year, it's like, whoa, that's a real big difference there. And I've got a different set of skills and doing.
You've learned new skills.
Things.
Everybody around this table has.
I love it.
Yeah. And one day I'll get good at podcasting.
Stop it.
Becky, any
No,
thoughts?
you guys are totally hitting it. I think the other thing that I liked that she said was, really thinking about, you guys have already touched on this, like the underlying skills that you have that have enabled you to do the work that you're doing still transfer to a totally different job. And to really highlight that when either you're interviewing or you're starting in a new field, be like, here's what I can do to like contribute right away, and I can learn the rest, and just be really like ready to keep learning,
Yeah.
keep contributing.
Yeah.
Yay.
Agreed. And I think about all the skills I learned in my 20s that I don't use now, but
Like which ones?
But you do, just in a different way, which is what she was saying.
Right.
Yeah, no, you're right. I a lot of writing and editing.
Sure.
But for particular products like news releases.
Sure.
And then, of course, I was learning how to trade currency on the black market in Central America in the 1980s. But that's a skill. I guess that's helping me with financial
You might need
management.
to qualify that one, Mac. People might get the wrong idea of what you were doing in South
I was
America.
working for a human rights group, but it was...
Sure you
Yeah, we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
But in a future show. But the point is, I just love the fact that we all have these stories inside of ourselves, and sometimes many of us forget them.
Yep.
And it's a good reminder.
Yeah. And I like Becky's reminder that they all compound, that we still use those skills. They look different, and we're building upon them rather than losing them.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, Danna, thank you for your contributions, and thank you, team, for your thoughts. And thank you, our listeners, for downloading today's episode of Find Your Dream Job. If you like what you hear, please sign up for our free weekly newsletter. In every issue, we give you the key points of that week's show, and we include links to all the resources mentioned. Plus, you get a transcript of the full episode. If you subscribe to the newsletter now, we'll send you our new guide, the Top Career Podcasts of 2017. Discover all the podcasts that can help you find a great job and get the career you want. Get your free newsletter and podcast guide today. Go to maxlist.org/Top Career Podcast 2017. And join us next Wednesday when our special guest will be Joy Marie Parker. She's the co-host of the Job Logs podcast, and she'll explain why it pays to take risks in your career. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.